Okay, section 1, 2, order of operations. And I'm sure that you've seen this before many times. Probably done this a million times, and we're going to do it again. If you've done it a million times, then you're probably pretty good at it, but we're going to do it anyway, so deal with it. Evaluate. You're going to see a lot of problems that just ask you to evaluate, and what that basically means is to find an answer. We need to find an answer to an expression. It might be expressions that we dealt with in 1-1. Could be an equation, but it's going to ask you to find an answer. And oftentimes you're going to have to use substitution to do so. And what that means is you could have an expression that says x squared minus 5, where x equals 6. And so you'd have to substitute that 6 in for x to evaluate the expression. So you may need to use substitution a lot of times to do that. Next, PEMDAS. We've all seen this before. PEMDAS is a way of telling us how to do the order of operations, the order they actually go in. And when I was in school, I learned it as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. I know there's a lot of different ways to do it, to learn it as an acronym. I know Mr. Felix had some demented thing he would say to get you guys to remember it. Either way, however you remember it, doesn't matter. Just know that this is the order in which we work through. And I purposely put it up and down because we know in English when we're reading we go left to right and up and down, so I'm going to go this way with PEMDAS. So the P stands for parentheses. And as you get further in this course and in math, it might not just be parentheses. It could be brackets, other ways to group things. So, but in this case, the P stands for parentheses. So practice problem here is if I gave you this expression, 2 times 5 minus 9. Well, in this case, what we have to do is we have to do the parentheses first because they're there. So we have to do that subtraction problem within the parentheses. So what is 5 minus 9? It comes out to a minus 4. And now we're taking that minus 4 times our 2. We're multiplying 2 times what was in the parentheses. Well, minus 4 is what's in parentheses. So 2 times a minus 4 becomes a negative 8. Becomes a negative 8. The E stands for exponents. Exponents. So you could have an expression that is, say, 2 squared minus 3 squared. Okay? And in these problems, you have to take care of the exponents before you can actually subtract these. So we're actually going to square these numbers and then subtract them. So in this case, 2 squared is 4. 3 squared is a 9. So 4 minus 9. And then we can get our equal sign here. 4 minus 9 gives us a negative 5 for an answer. So we had to do the exponents first. We actually have to square them first. Then we can subtract because of order of operations. Next is multiply and divide. And you can see the little squiggly here. Basically means that these are interchangeable. You can multiply and divide at the same time. But bottom line is what we're trying to do here is understand that with these, multiplication and division, sure they are, you can do them at the same time, but if there's 2 of them in a row, we want to make sure that we go left to right here. Multiply and divide, but we want to go left to right. And I'll give you an example of that, but we want to make sure that when we come across this, we go left to right. Very important there. And I'll show you an example, and I'll show you what I mean, why it's important to go left to right. Okay, so our first expression here is let's go with 24 divided by 6 times 2. Okay, so in this case, we have a division and a multiplication problem. So we could do either, right? Well, our rule says to go left to right. So we're going to take it from left to right. There's a division problem first. So that's what we're going to take a look at right off the bat. So we're going to go 24 divided by 6, which happens to be 4. And then we're going to multiply it by 2. So left to right across. And then 4 times 2 equals 8. So it's worth noting in this case that if you notice you get the answer of 8. But if you were to go left, not go left to right, if you were to go right to left here and actually multiply the 6 times 2 first, you'd get an answer of 2 because you'd have 24 divided by 12 and you'd get 2. That's not correct. 2 is not the correct answer. When there's multiplication and division together, we're going to work left to right. Okay? And I'm going to highlight that again just so you know. Very important that we're going to go left to right with multiplication and division. Okay? Same thing with addition and subtraction. As far as you can do them at the same time, after parentheses and exponents, and after you've multiplied and divided all you needed to, you can add and subtract. Again, we want to go left to right. It gets a little trickier because you start thinking about negative numbers instead of subtraction, but basically we're talking about going left to right with addition and subtraction as well. So add and subtract, and again, we're working left to right. So our example here would be, let's go 11 minus 3 plus 9. So again, we both have addition and subtraction here, so we're going to work left to right. 11 minus 3 happens to be 8, and then we're going to add that 9 to it, so 8 plus 9 equals 17. Again, going left to right is important here, because if you didn't do that, you'd have a different answer than 17. So we have to do the left to right, 11 minus 3 first to give us 8, and then add 9 to get 17. And I can't say it enough when you get to this point here. This is where people mess it up, but we got to go left to right on both multiplication and division, addition, subtraction. All right, evaluate expressions. We're just going to do number 1 and 3 here and work through these. So we've got 16 minus 8 divided by 2 squared plus 14. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, do we have any parentheses? No, we don't. So next on the list is exponents. Do we have exponents? We sure do. 2 squared. So let's evaluate that first. What is 2 squared? Well, it's 4. So I'm going to take that, evaluate that expression, and now I'm going to bring everything else down. And I want you to show the work here every step. I know that it's monotonous sometimes, but I want to see that you're actually figuring these out. And I'll actually just show the steps. I know you can punch it in your calculator and you'll be all right, but you're not going to get credit on a test or quiz or on your notes unless you show steps. I always say, hey, you skip steps, just like running up and down the stairs. You can skip steps, you'll be okay every once in a while, but sometimes you're going to fall on your face. So make sure we're showing our work and showing all the steps. Now we have to look multiplication, division. Yes, we have division right here in the middle. So we're going to take that, 8 divided by 4, and that's going to give us a 2. Everything else is coming down, including that minus sign that is in front of the 8. So 16 minus 2 plus 14. And now we can add and subtract across left to right. 16 minus 2 is 14, plus 14 would give us a 28. And now let's go down to number 3. So let's look at 3 and say, ask that first question. Do we see any parentheses? We sure do. 10 minus 6. So we're going to take care of those parentheses first, and then we're going to get an answer of 4. And now we have to multiply that by 5. We're going to bring everything else down, and then we have 12 divided by 6. And notice how I put the multiplication dot or the times dot here because it's 2 numbers. I'll do that if it's 2 numbers, but if it was a variable here, an x or y, I probably wouldn't do that. It would just be 5x. But because it's a number, I put it in there to remind us that we're multiplying and dividing. Okay, so now we've taken care of parentheses. There's no exponents. We go to multiply and divide. So this 12 divided by 6 is a division problem. It's a fraction. Hopefully we know that that's a fraction. So, and a fraction is a division problem. So we're going to go ahead and go 12 divided by 6, which gives us 2. And then we're going to add, but we can multiply here. 5 times 4 is 20. So we could divide and multiply at the same time, just like we talked about. But here's our division problem. 12 divided by 6 becomes 2. Here's our multiplication problem. 5 times 4 becomes 20. And now we've got 2 plus 20 gives us an answer of 22. And we can save numbers 2 and 3, come back to those later. You can get some more practice on those if you'd like. But as long as you remember PEMDAS, you're in good shape. And that if you get in a situation where you multiply and divide or add and subtract, we go left to right. Next, evaluate each expression. So in this case, we're talked about at the beginning, this is where we're going to use substitution. So I'm going to highlight this as well, that this is the actual place where we're gonna use these numbers to answer these questions. And I'm only going to do one for this one. Let's just do number 7 down here, just to get an idea. And again, you can use the other ones to practice. So on number 7. So first thing we have, I'm just going to rewrite the problem so it's a little bigger so you can see it. And I'm going to go x squared plus y divided by z. Okay? And I want to see you substitute. I want to get full credit. You're going to have to show me that you're plugging these numbers in. So in this case, x is 4. So you're going to put that 4 in for x. Substitute it in. 4 squared plus 5, because it said y equals 5 up here. And we're dividing it by z, and z is equal to 3. So 4 squared plus 5 divided by 3. So now we're actually using PEMDAS. We're going to use order of operations to evaluate this expression. So do we see any parentheses? No. Do we see any powers or exponents? Yes. 4 squared. So I'm going to take care of that. 4 squared is 16, and I'm rewriting the problem. And that's what I want you to do. Get used to it. Every teacher in this building wants you to show the steps, show the math. And we got plus 5 divided by 3. Okay, here's where this one gets a little bit tricky in the fact that, yeah, it's a fraction and it's a division sign here, but in order to divide, we have to know what we're going to divide. So think of it in a fraction here as two separate problems. You got a numerator problem and a denominator problem. So let's take care of the numerator first, and then we can figure it out. So we're going to add that, and we're actually going to go 16 plus 5 is 21, and then we've got the 3 that we can divide, which then equals 7. Okay, so I know it's a little bit saying, oh, it's not order of operations because we should divide here first. Well, you have to have something to divide. In this case, you're dividing 3 into 16 and 5. So we're going to add those up first. So think of it as maybe even a parenthesis. You have to do that numerator first to get 7 there. Okay, that's all you're going to see. You can work on 5, 6, and 8 for more practice. Your lesson summary is list the correct order in which you would use to evaluate an expression. You better get that one right. Or else it's going to be a long year. We're going to have trouble if we can't get that one right. So what's the order in which you would use to evaluate an expression? And then the practice problem here is you're going to evaluate 5x squared minus 6x plus 2. All you got to do is substitute in that negative 2 where you see an x. And just as a little hint, be careful with your negatives. Be careful especially when you're squaring it, what happens. So just giving you a little tip. Be careful with that negative 2 when you plug it in for all those x's. Okay, that's it from here. And bring any questions you have with you, and we can go over them tomorrow before we get to work. So we will see you then.